Hi, everyone. Logan Hertz here with Hazeltine LLC. We are going to continue responding to comments. So, Fatima Foster here replies to my Attack of the Medical Cartel Part 1. So, this is going through some of my medical challenges, not only my personal health challenges, but the challenges associated with navigating the evil medical system that we all suffer under. And unfortunately, I've learned firsthand. I have a very low opinion of medical so-called professionals these days. I think they are mostly overpaid bureaucrats, mostly self-interested. They don't really have any respect for the patients. And they are bureaucrats, which means that they can treat the patients however they want. They're never held accountable for anything that they do. You, as the patient, have to advocate for yourself. The doctor is certainly not going to be an advocate for you. They work for the insurance companies, the drug companies, and the government. That's who pays their bills. You, as the patient, are not the paying customer. Therefore, you're not really that important to them. I could go into a lot more details on that one, but I do have to vent a little bit after you suffered as much as I have at the hands of these people who call themselves doctors and the system, which is, let's just say, not set up for the benefit of the patient. So I may do a couple more videos on that. I think it's an opportunity for me to have some catharsis. Honestly, one of the things I've learned about being a content creator is that there can be some good catharsis. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but there are some people that I've watched their podcasts, and sometimes I think they're a bit shouty and a bit angry. But now, having been a content creator, I understand where they're coming from because I realize if you vent a little bit on some public platform, it actually helps you to get over whatever wrong you suffered, whatever hurt you're dealing with. It actually is very helpful. And so you then view that person as being very angry and very shouty, but they're probably not in real life. There's probably just they took the opportunity to vent on that particular podcast. And I've done some of that. And I found that there is a certain catharsis in publicly stating some of my experiences with the medical system and publicly calling out certain people for what they have done. It's helpful to me. It helps me to deal with it better, to have that catharsis, which, by the way, that's a great Greek word, the catharsis. Fatima Foster says, always providing excellent value with all your videos. This one is super excellent. Thank you so much for the comment, Fatima. I appreciate it. And then we had a bit of an exchange here. I'll actually read what she said. I asked her if she had some similar stories. Unfortunately, I think most people have. That's the unfortunate thing. Maybe not as dramatic as what I've been through, but I think most people know someone or have personally experienced navigating the medical system. She says, nothing major. Years ago, I went to the doctor for back pain after a car accident. They did x rays and said nothing was wrong. By chance, I came across a free chiropractic session, and that solved my back pain. He did his own x rays and showed me how the subluxations I had were affecting me. He spent time going over this. Since then, I have always leaned towards alternative treatments as I could see how differently I was treated. I am happy that the conventional medical system was no help, as their lack of help pushed me to find other avenues. LOL. However, I can understand that there are situations that are very serious where we must go through the regular medical system and find a way for them to help us. Thankfully, the chiropractor was able to help me in this situation. Thanks for your comment, Fatima. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad you got the help that you needed. Yeah, I think one of the main things you notice when you get outside of the medical cartel is that people are actually willing to take the time to sit down with you, listen to you, and educate you on what they're doing and why they're doing it. Right. So I'm working with a doctor now who is actually, I think, a very good primary care physician, and she is in the conventional system, but she's actually helping me. She's actually taking the time to do the research, to talk with her colleagues, try and figure out what's going wrong. And she's been excellent. She's been a huge help. And she's in the conventional system, but she told me the only reason she's able to help me as much as she can and give me her time, give me this much time, is because she doesn't do it as her full time job. If this was her full time job, she can only give me the standard 7.5 minutes that other doctors give me. She really couldn't do much more than that, unfortunately. So I think it's not so much about conventional versus alternative as it is about, are they in the insurance cartel or not? Because if they're in the insurance cartel, meaning they take insurance and that pays most of their bills, they have to do what the insurance company tells them because that's who's paying them. So I think with the alternative providers, it's not so much that alternative treatments are better than conventional treatments. It's more that because they don't take insurance and insurance doesn't cover it, they have different financial incentives. So they actually work for their patients. When I go to these alternative providers, some of them are great, some of them are not great. I can think of one in particular who is not very great. She likes to lecture me a lot and she was self righteous, but I didn't have to deal with the bureaucracy. When I would go to meet her, she would be waiting for me. I wouldn't wait for her. And we had a direct relationship. I'm talking directly with her. I'm not having to navigate bureaucrats. And we spend a significant amount of time together. Typically, the first time you engage with someone like that, you're going to have a good 90 minutes with that person. So, my first session, it was 45 minutes of let's sit down and go through your health history and help me understand what's going on. And then 45 minutes of the first treatment. And then, of course, they don't charge you an arm and a leg. They charge you and you have to pay out of pocket. So it might seem like a lot of money for someone who's used to having insurance cover everything. But if you imagine a scenario where you're not paying anything in insurance premiums and you're just paying money out of pocket, you'll end up paying less overall. Whereas when you go to the conventional system, it's come in, sit down, take a number. You might as well be at the DMV. You're lucky if they see you when your scheduled appointment time was. Normally, they see you, 30 minutes after your appointment time, and there's no apology. They don't apologize to the patient for making you wait. They don't have to apologize to you. They don't care about you. And the average appointment time is 7.5 minutes. That's how much time the doctor will spend with you, 7.5 minutes. And the doctor never asks any open ended questions. They never sit down and say, hey, explain to me what's going on. Let me listen. No, they ask you a series of close-ended questions which are intended to fit you in a box. And I'm already going off on a tangent here, but there's a lot more I could say about that. But I've already said a lot. We'll move on. So then she says, I don't know what I did is I can't see my response anymore. I had some back pain after a car accident. The regular medical system said there was nothing wrong after doing x-rays. Somehow I came across chiropractic and was actually helped. Plus, the chiropractor spent time explaining to me why I was having the problems I was having. Since then, I have leaned toward using alternative treatments. Thankfully, chiropractic is more common now. This was many years ago. Thank you. Yeah, YouTube has been eating comments. So, what oftentimes happens is the default sort order for some reason hides a bunch of comments. So, if you just change the sort order from the default to most recent, then your comments will appear. It's strange. And she says, I see. Thank you and you're welcome to your initial reply. He had this really neat set of three displays of the body's internal systems like nerves, blood flow, etc., that were like on top of x ray machines. He would click on one subluxation that was pinched or not in place, and it would light up the part of the body that it affected. He told me that doctors aren't trained to see these subluxations or that they ignore them. I no longer recall. All his explanations always made sense to me. He wasn't pushing me out the door to his next patient. I kept seeing him until I found a different type of alternative treatment. He helped me with the initial big problem that I had as a result of the accident, but there were more issues that weren't as pressing that were later resolved with two other alternative treatments, including something called NCR, neurocranial reconstructing, and something called Atlas prophylax. These last two helped me a lot. Thank you for your comment, Fatima. I'm glad you were able to get the help that you needed. It seems like you had to do a fair amount of research to get there, but I'm glad you were able to find the help that you needed. One of my challenges, I just don't have the mental capacity to make good decisions and do things. It's easy for people who are not struggling with the health issues I'm struggling with to say, oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do that. Oh, you should do that. That's easy for you to say. You're perfectly healthy. I am not. For me to make the right decisions and do anything is very challenging. So it becomes a downward spiral because fighting and researching to figure out what's going on and fixing it is hard, even under circumstances where you have total mental clarity. And I do not have mental clarity where I'm making good decisions. It's holding me back in many ways. But I'm glad you were able to find the help that you needed. Maybe I'll do some more content around this because I get a lot of sympathy, and I hear a lot of similar stories about it. So Rebecca Lankford comments on Velocity Banking with a first lien HELOC with our Anthony Rushing interview, and she says, seems shady. They do not detail the product effectively. This product is high risk. Thanks for your comment, Rebecca. What about it seems shady, and why do you say the product is high risk? DeAndre and I addressed this a bit in a different video, but what about it seems shady, and why do you say it's high risk? And why are you focused on the product? They do not detail the product effectively. Actually, if you look at the title of the video, it says Velocity Banking with a first lien HELOC. So if you're focused on the product, you're already missing the point. We're focused on the strategy, which is velocity banking, which you can do velocity banking with multiple different vehicles. In this case, we're talking about a first lien HELOC, but the emphasis should be on the strategy, not the product. A HELOC by itself does nothing. The question is, how are you using it? So if you're going to make a statement like that, you need to justify it. Why are you saying the product is high risk? What about it seems high risk to you? And why do you say it seems shady? I don't understand what's shady about it. Anthony Rushing is a mortgage loan officer. You can look him up. He works for First Savings Bank. Everything's above board. So I'm not sure where this comes from. So I'd love to hear why you think it's shady and why you think the product is high risk and why are you focused on the product instead of the strategy? Of course, we're not detailing the product. The point of the video is to talk about the strategy. If we go into the details of the product, that's missing the point, and those details are always specific to individual cases, not relevant for a general audience, which is what this is for, and they change all the time. The details change all the time. The more we go into details, the less relevant it is for many people watching, and the less helpful and the more misleading it is. But thank you for your comment. Feel free to comment more. I'd love to hear. I like hearing alternative views. So I'd love to hear why you think it's shady and high risk. I'd love to hear you explain that a bit more. Keep commenting, please. Thank you, Rebecca, for your comment. Okay, Jack Allwile says, thanks for educating my questions and on educating the masses, Logan. Thanks, Jack, for coming on the show. This is Jack Allwile, who is an actuary, and did a few episodes with me, which I really appreciated. We had a very interesting conversation. This one was on infinite banking. And then on the first lien HELOC portion, he said, great discussion, Logan. The first lien HELOC can be a useful tool for the right person. Looking forward to learning even more on this topic. Thank you, Jack. Thanks for coming on the program. Or I guess I came on your program technically. So thanks for having me. And Jack also invests in real estate. So he is in a position to utilize the first lien HELOC in many unique and interesting ways. So it was interesting to get the perspective of an actuary on these tools. So going back to Rebecca, if this were a high risk, shady product, I'm pretty sure an actuary like Jack Allwile could point that out. You're not going to get much past an actuary that's not legit. Now, it is true, just like anything else, if it's misused, it could work against you, just like anything else. If you make an investment, that investment could go south if you don't know how to manage it properly. Or even if you do manage it properly and the market doesn't perform the way you expected, that doesn't make it shady. There may be some risk associated with it. But I would say a first lien HELOC used properly removes risk. There's still risk there, but there's less risk. Again, but for the right person and in the right situation. Velocity banking is not for everyone. The first lien HELOC is not for everyone. That's why we have an ambassador program. So you work with someone like me who can vet you and look at your circumstances. And there are many people where I've told them this is not the right product for you. This is not the right strategy for you. It's not for everyone. Thank you, Jack, for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate the engagement. The MRG 59 says, did we sanity check those monthly expenses? 150 on food for a family of 6, 1200 on toiletries, but 150 on clothes. Thanks for your comment. I greatly appreciate it. This is on the first lien HELOC case study part 1. First of all, you're missing the point, right? The point of that video was to show how you can use a first lien HELOC to more efficiently pay off debt. And I used real numbers from an actual prospect that I spoke with. So I know those numbers might seem off to you, but they are actually accurate for that particular person. And there's a lot of reasons for that. When it comes to food, they actually produce some of their own food. So their food costs are actually fairly low for a number of reasons. And they can make some of their own clothes too. Anyway, a point being, that's missing the point, right? The point is not to go through their itemized expenses and see if they're realistic for you or not. And this, by the way, is why I don't often go into details on videos, because the more you go into details, the more it confuses people, the more it's misleading, and the more it's just not relevant for a general audience. Because whenever I do a specific use case and use specific details, those details are specific to that use case and they are not relevant for a general audience. So the purpose of this video is to just show an example of how you can use a first lien HELOC to optimize your debt payoff. What your monthly expenses are can change, and what your specific debts that you're paying off will be different. It's just to show an example. But those numbers are accurate for that particular use case. Yes. Probably not relevant for you, but for that particular use case, yes. And then the MRG59 comments again on another one of my first lien HELOC videos. He says, $6,500 being a strangely high amount for closing costs just means you don't do much real estate business in the Northeast, or I guess are familiar with. The further northeast you go, in general, the worse the transfer taxes can get. 1% or more of the sale value transfer tax on top of bank origination fees, title insurance costs, all the other normal stuff. I have a pre-approval with FSB for the first lien HELOC for a new purchase, and we had to estimate about $15,000 in closing costs on roughly $500K house. But I don't understand calling them closing costs irrelevant. I mean, I would make what I consider to be decent money, and velocity banking or not. 15K is 15K, or 6,500 is 6,500, and if I could avoid paying it, I would. Thanks for your comment, the MRG. I greatly appreciate it. This is going into more of why I don't get into specific details, because those details are specific and not relevant for everyone. So thank you for educating the audience on how things work in the Northeast. I think some of this depends on whether you're doing a new purchase or you're doing a refi. But the closing costs, to me, seem to have nothing to do with a first lien HELOC per se. It's just the typical closing costs you would see associated with a new home purchase in the Northeast. I don't see how the first lien HELOC is adding additional closing costs more than what you would typically see. So I don't see how it changes anything. And yeah, of course, 15K or 6,500. Yeah, of course, I would avoid those fees if I can. The reason I say it's irrelevant is because it's missing the point. Like James Nethery says, and he's talking about infinite banking, but I think this is relevant across the board. Like he says, if you don't understand the concept, if you don't understand the strategy, then the details don't matter. If you do understand the strategy, the details don't matter. Why do we say this? Yeah, you're right. All things being equal, sure, I would like to avoid a cost. But the more you dig into it, the more you see there's no free lunch. And that's really the only point I'm trying to make here. There is no free lunch. So the bank has certain costs associated with putting a first lien HELOC or a mortgage in place, and they must pass those costs on to you one way or another. So if they're not charging you closing costs, they're making money somewhere else. So you say, I would avoid paying it if I could. And I agree, I would too. The problem is you cannot avoid it because otherwise the bank would not be profitable. And we all know banks are profitable. And so I had a case recently where a person took out a first lien HELOC with a bank that did not charge closing costs. And what they do instead is they have a very high prepayment penalty, very high. And so they end up making their money that way. So what happens is you pay no closing costs, but now that very steep threat of a prepayment penalty keeps you locked into that particular first lien HELOC. And now they can charge you whatever interest rate they want, and they end up making their money that way. And I'm not saying they're doing anything devious or wrong. That's just the way that it works. They're going to have to make that back somehow. So they have to charge a high enough interest rate and have a prepayment penalty to compensate for the fact that they just ate the closing costs. All things being equal, I would like to avoid those costs, but there's no way to avoid them. Unless you think the banks are not profitable, I want to have a sustainable relationship with all of my financial partners where it's profitable for both of us. That's the way you do good business across the board. Yeah, and thank you for your input on some properties in the Northeast. I think that's helpful. Definitely geography matters. I would just say that the things you're pointing out are not specific to the first lien HELOC. They're specific to the Northeast. But regardless of how you're financing your purchases, those are costs you're going to have anyway. Those are not costs that are specific to a first lien HELOC. And then we had an exchange, and he said, "Oh, I'm not arguing with your point that essentially there's no free lunch. I was strictly referring to the commentary around 6,500 being high in closing costs. Transfer taxes are brutal up here, and at least in the state I'm in, they heavily regulate what the title insurance stuff can cost. So that alone has a floor of something like 3,500, regardless of home price. So there's not much shopping around you can do for closing costs between banks. Main difference is a mortgage has required escrow as a part of closing, and the HELOC won't. Unless the bank agrees to pay part of your closing costs, which BOA specifically actually does in some zip codes around me, it's an ESG thing. But to your point, specifically with BOA's situation, it's really not hard to imagine refinancing for little or no cost if you're already a customer with them with a decent amount of assets, it's traditional checking slash savings, whatever their investment platform is called, and credit. When I bought my current house in 2020, I was banking with Chase at the time, and I had banked with them for 5 or 6 years already. They gave me 5K off of closing so long as I agreed to keep my accounts with them for a year, I think it was. But anyway, I found your content researching velocity banking further after I started the application process for FSB to learn more about the concept. I already have had my WL policy, so the VB with IBC content crossover was light, and I wanted to see if there was anyone else out there thinking the way I was with combining my whole life with velocity banking. It's validated what I was thinking so far. Take the likes and engagement as my thanks. Thanks for your comment, the MRG. I really appreciate the engagement. I would love to hear how your journey is going. I would love for you to comment again and give us some updates on how it's working, combining infinite banking with velocity banking. How is your journey coming along? What have you learned? What results have you seen? I would love to hear about it because you're right. I'm trying to create content around combining infinite banking with velocity banking. But the challenge is that most people just need the basics. Very intelligent, successful people with a lot of money, they just need the basics. That's what most people need. So the more specialized and specific my content becomes, the less relevant it becomes for most people. The audience for combining infinite banking with velocity banking is very small. Whereas if I talk just about, say, the infinite banking concept using whole life insurance, or even broaden it more and say just talk about whole life insurance in general, then I have a much larger audience. So at the end of the day, I am running a business. I can't just talk about what interests me. I have to talk about what my audience wants to hear. And usually, what's most helpful for my audience is sticking to high level, basic explanations of the strategy. And then, if they want more specific details, they can schedule time with me and we can go through their specific situation. Thank you for clarifying on Bank of America and Chase. You are 100% correct. That was something that DeAndre and I said, which is I could see where Bank of America would not charge you closing costs if they're making money off of you some other way. If you have a checking account with them, a savings account, assets under management, credit card, other debt instruments with them. So you're 100% correct. And I like what you're pointing out here, which is that here we're talking about the banks, but this applies to people like me as well. Build long term relationships with people. Build long term relationships with people. You got a great deal at Chase because you had been banking with them for 5 or 6 years. So you had built that relationship. So they gave you 5,000 off of closing. That's a great deal. They gave that to you because you've been a loyal customer. You built a long term relationship with them. I encourage people to do that with me as well. And I try to do that with my clients and with my business partners. I'm looking to build long term strategic relationships. And if you do that, you get much better deals overall, but the upfront costs might be higher. You got to invest time and money and effort into building those relationships. But over the long run, you end up getting a much better deal. Whereas if you come in and just are always looking for the lowest cost, cheapest product, it's going to cost you less in the short run. But over the long run, you're not going to get access to any of these deals that people who build long term strategic relationships are getting. Wealthy people get a lot of stuff for free that the average person doesn't because they know how to build long term strategic relationships. Back when I was in Atlanta, before my health issues forced me back up to Virginia, I built relationships with local farmers and I got all kinds of deals from them that they were not going to give to the average person because I had been a loyal customer buying from them every week for more than a year. And so I got access to deals that other people wouldn't. They gave me deals all the time. So I like what you're pointing out, the MRG, which is when you build a long term strategic relationship with a business partner, you get much better deals over the long run. So, yep, you're validating what DeAndre and I said, which is that I could see where a bank would not charge you closing costs on a first lien HELOC or a mortgage if they're making money off of you somewhere else. So, assets under management, as an example, which is very profitable for the bank. So, thank you for your comment. Please keep engaging. Really appreciate it. And let us know how things are going. Love to hear. Fatima Foster says, best wishes on your health journey. Thank you so much, Fatima. And then she says, you're welcome. Really appreciate the support. This was me giving another update on my health, which I'll probably do another one at some point. It'll probably be me ranting a bit more against the medical cartel, but I've earned the right to rant after the way that I've been treated and continue to be treated. I had to suffer through another self-righteous condescending lecture from a doctor recently and basically get thrown out because she had to get to her next patient. She didn't have time to actually have a conversation with me and actually review test results. I got to get to my next patient. Your 7 minutes is up. Get out. Yeah, don't get me started. But thank you for your support. Really appreciate it. Jack Allwell says, I'm able to think in more nuance every time talking and listening to you, Logan. Thanks for including me in these discussions. Thanks so much for coming on the program, Jack. I look forward to doing more interviews in the future. This was on part 3 of our interview series, where we talked about combining infinite banking with velocity banking, which is a really cool strategy. Daughter NE says, I'm favored 130K every 4 weeks. I now have a good house and can afford anything and also support my family. Thank you for your comment. This was on my infinite banking with an actuary part 3 interview. Really appreciate it. And there was quite a few exchanges here. I'm not sure if some of these comments came from bots. I suspect maybe some of them did. I'm not sure, but I appreciate the engagement. I'd love to hear what you're doing where you're making $130,000 every 4 weeks. I would love to hear how you accomplish that. Congratulations on your success. Then we have another comment that is certainly from a bot, but thank you for commenting. Something to keep in mind when you're on YouTube or social media, which I don't know why you would be on social media, you shouldn't be. But when you see people saying things that make you really angry, just keep in mind it might not be an actual human being. It could be a bot. So just remind yourself of that. You might be yelling at software. So it might not be an actual human being. I always remind myself of that when I see some of the ridiculous stuff out there. I take a moment to calm myself down and say, wait a minute, this might be a bot. No actual human being would say this. So before I get too angry, in search of efficiency, comments on my health update and says, prayers and blessings to you. Thanks for your courage to share this. Thanks. I really appreciate it. And then I just asked him if he had anything similar to share. And he said, different challenges in Canada with socialist healthcare system, which has pros and cons. My family and I have had mixed experiences. If your condition is standard and not urgent, e.g., non cancerous cyst or hip replacement, usually ends well, but you may need to wait 12 months. If simple and urgent, e.g., broken bone, usually goes well, may need to wait up to 12 hours in emergency. If non-standard and or urgent, e.g., conditions not easily diagnosed that may take several different types of tests, consequences could be difficult. Sometimes takes a lot of persistence and creativity to navigate through multiple specialists passing the buck. That said, there are many excellent and caring doctors, but they are sometimes limited by the public system. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. That doesn't sound too different from what we have to navigate in the United States. The good news is there are more alternatives out there. I think more and more you're seeing alternatives, not only in terms of the sort of healthcare that's available, but the financing of it. Because to me, maybe it's because of my business, but I'm always trying to follow the money. Follow the money. I do not expect doctors to be Mother Teresa's. That's not a realistic expectation. Very few people are Mother Teresa's. So I want to set it up so that the doctors are financially incentivized to act in the patient's best interest, as opposed to the health insurance company's best interests. There's a whole lot more we could say about that. But again, the good news is if you look at, as an example, crowd health, I've talked about crowd health before on my show. That is a way that could get you outside of the health insurance system where you're coming in as a cash patient and saving a lot of money in the process. And doctors love getting paid in cash. They don't have to deal with the insurance company. And now you can have a direct relationship with that doctor. And the insurance company is not dictating to him what he can and cannot do. And so it opens up a lot of options and it makes it just a much better, more direct relationship with the doctor. So that's what I want. I don't have utopian ideas or utopian goals. I just want the doctors to be financially incentivized to serve the customer or the patient being the customer, not the insurance companies, not the drug companies, not the government, but the patients. So thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. Mr. Heat One Up says, "Why is the screen so blurry?" And I said, "It's not." And he said, "Okay, it's also clear on my phone. Must have been a connection issue. Thank you." Thank you for commenting. And thank you for watching my videos. I'm glad to hear the screen is not blurry. It's just an issue on your end. Thanks. Says velocity banking is a game changer. Thanks, Mario. And then he said, "Just heard about this a month ago and I'm ready to start." Awesome, Mario. Let us know how it goes. Feel free to sign up with me, or if you sign up with someone else or do it on your own, just keep us posted. Let us know how things are going. Best wishes on your journey. Let me know if I can help you in any way. Police 994 says, "Love the presentation, better than anyone out there." Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. This is on my first Lien HELOC explainer video. Really appreciate it. TWOMPZ1. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Twomps. Yeah. He says, "Love your content. I'm interested in getting my life insurance license. Can you recommend a company to work for after getting license? I want to learn the IBC method as well." Excellent. I'm glad to have more people in the business. Come talk to me about it. When you say recommend a company, I don't know if you mean the agency or the insurance company. Short answer is it depends. There are various different ones that are good. Depends on your situation. There's no one right answer to that question. And that's part of the beauty of this business. You can go to whoever makes sense for you, whoever fits you and your clients the best. Thanks for your comment. If I can help you at all, let me know. And let me know if you do get into the business, how things go. And then he comments again. It says, "I'm interested." This was on our Matt Seibert interview where we talked about how to succeed as a life insurance agent. Yeah, great to hear your enthusiasm. Let me know if I can help you. I'm trying to get as many people into the business as possible. The more, the better. We need to make whole life insurance and infinite banking as common as retirement accounts. We need to make more people aware of these alternative solutions. Doctor of Financial Literacy says, "Awesome video." Commenting on First Lien HELOC answering objections part 2. Thank you. And then I asked him anything in particular, and he said the various types of interest. "I love to be interviewed as a case study of velocity banking as a practitioner on your channel." Yeah, I'm always open to having other people on my channel. Get in touch with me and we will see what makes sense. But yeah, sure. I'm always open to the idea, always open to collaborating. Jay Cox, 1982 says, "Always a great job, Logan. I enjoy your content." Thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate it. This was on our interview on the millionaire journey with Glenn Yaney. I was interviewed on his channel and then I posted it on mine. And this is Recycle Your Capital with Infinite Banking. And then he says, "It was more so just a reminder / reinforcement of what I need to make happen. While in the process of doing a cash out refinance back in 2022, I came across the infinite banking concept and it blew my mind. Once I closed on the refi, I set up my policy and used the cash out to dump into the policy. A few months later, I found out about velocity banking and I was mind blown again. I've been researching it for every bit of 2 years and have been painfully unsuccessful in obtaining a first lien HELOC within this time. Every time I pay my mortgage, I die a little bit inside, lol. But once I'm in a position to obtain that HELOC, I'm going to execute infinite velocity. This video and all your others with DeAndre just reminds me of the goal. Awesome, Jaycox 1982. I'm so glad to hear that you are succeeding with infinite velocity. Keep us posted of your progress and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Thank you, everyone, for the comments and the engagement. I greatly appreciate it.